with Shane McMahon set to make a return to WWE and more. This is Wrestling Hub. My name is John and you're watching the Wrestling Report for March 31st. Before we get into the rest of the video, make sure you subscribe to Wrestling Hub and turn on all notifications to stay up to date with everything in the world of pro wrestling. Also, don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Wrestling Hub Official and also follow us on Twitter at Wrestling_Hub. Appearing on the Town podcast to promote WrestleMania, WWE President Nick Khan spoke about talent in the company, claiming everyone has the chance to make it big. Number one, everyone is treated humanely, and everyone deserves to be treated that way. There are analogies with our company and other companies. Was Shaq treated better than any player on the team other than Kobe? Of course, that's the way it is. Will Smith wasn't grabbed and escorted out of the room after slapping Chris Rock. Part of it was, people didn't know what to do, because they haven't experienced it before, but part of it is that he's Will Smith. Tough to have security grab him and toss him out of the building. It's the same way with us. It's a meritocracy. If you're at the top of the card, maybe you have a bigger dressing room than the person at the bottom of the card, but everyone has the same opportunity to earn their way there. Given Cesaro and WWE were not able to come to terms on a new deal, many are expecting him to make his debut for AEW. On the Wrestling Perspective podcast, Eddie Kingston touched on potential opponents for him, claiming he wants Cesaro. There's a couple of people. I know I say I don't want him at AEW, but Claudio Castagnoli, I would love him to be in AEW so I can smack the shit out of him. We have a lot of unfinished business. Like you said, you don't want to know the backstage stuff, that's fine. But there's some serious stuff between us. I would love to end it and see if he does the right thing at AEW, but again, not my show. With her set to face Becky Lynch for the Raw Women's title at WrestleMania, Bianca Belair talked on the Bella's podcast about how she met her husband, Montez Ford. We met in NXT. It was definitely love at first sight for me. He was in NXT for about a year when I came. I saw him in April when I first started. I remember seeing him and I said to one of my friends, "That's a beautiful man. Keep him away from me." He ended up getting injured and went away for a couple months. One of the girls had a dinner where we all met up to get to know each other and hang out. He walked through the door at this sushi restaurant. I was like, he's here. I'm going after him. So I went after him and I got him. We never spent a day away from each other after that day. Then we moved into an apartment together. A year later we were engaged, and then a year later we were married. It's like when you know, you know. I've never experienced that before, but when I saw him, I knew. During his interview on the MMA Hour, Paul Heyman touched on Cody Rhodes departing AEW, as he said this came down to creative frustration. He's one of the founders of the company. A lot of it is his concept. A lot of the initial phase was on him, and Cody always had a vision to fill the boots of his father, not just in the ring but behind the scenes. And the fact that he didn't have the level of participation in decision making that he initially probably thought, that is speculation on my end. I never heard this from Cody, but just seeing the manner in which the creative end of that company grew, it doesn't surprise me that at some point he was going to say, not what I originally envisioned, and want to see what life is like elsewhere. So when a founder of a company whose initial vision it was, or part of it was, leaves, that's always surprising. Knowing what I know, and that's admittedly very little of these circumstances, not so surprised. For that same interview, Heyman would also talk about Brock Lesnar's current character in WWE, explaining why it took this long for Lesnar to show off his personality. Brock Lesnar has a great sense of humor. It is simply the fact that Lesnar never really found the time in WWE to display it. He displayed some of it in UFC, and that is just a part of his personality. That is what he's like on his farm. That is what he's like when Brock hunts. This is off-season Brock, and he brought off-season Brock to fight season this time around because he was going to have to show a different side of his personality because I was attached to the hip of Roman Reigns. He didn't need to. It wasn't time yet. It's the same reason why you didn't see the Tribal Chief in 2012. You had to see the Samoan badass of the Shield. You had to see the big dog. And you keep on elevating and enhancing and upgrading until finally Roman Reigns was ready to reveal the head of the table. This is part of Brock Lesnar's personality. Brock Lesnar is not a one-dimensional human being. Barely a human being at all. He is a beast. Speaking to WWE UK ahead of his tag team match against The Miz and Logan Paul, Rey Mysterio noted that he is hoping for a father-son WrestleMania moment with Dominic. "My son and I have been working really hard and prepping up for this match because it's an important one. Not only is it my son's first WrestleMania moment, but it's also our first WrestleMania moment together as father and son. I don't think there's ever been a father and son moment at WrestleMania, so we want to make sure that's established and we want to make sure we get that W." In a potential conflict for WrestleMania, Kevin Owens recently stated that he will be the main event of Mania on Saturday night for his segment with Steve Austin. Also, Ronda Rousey has claimed her match against Charlotte will be the main event of that night. Talking about this on Wrestling Observer Radio, Dave Meltzer noted that Rousey was not aware of changes in the plan. Kevin Owens was scripted to say that he is in the main event. So, on Monday night, he was very clearly in the main event on Monday night because he didn't say that off the cuff. He was told, "You say that." Tuesday, Ronda Rousey says she's on the main event on Saturday with Charlotte Flair. So I'm thinking like, wow, it's probably Kevin Owens because I know he was scripted on Raw, and they probably never told Ronda because they planned all along from the day of the Royal Rumble until, I don't know, close to Monday, because even midweek, it was still Ronda Rousey in the main event. I'm guessing that they never told Ronda that they changed it. Vince is going back and forth. Nobody knows, and who knows? Shouldn't when Kevin made that proclamation, shouldn't that be like the decision? And shouldn't like Ronda Rousey be aware of that? Well, keeps going back and forth. Speaking to Shaq Wrestling, Kurt Angle mentioned the current state of pro wrestling, claiming that psychology has been lost due to a reliance on spot fests. It's receded because a lot of these athletes now just do a bunch of spots. Nothing really makes sense. It's more of a spot fest. They go out there and do these impressive things. A couple flips over the top rope on the floor, things that don't tell a story. Psychology is the most important thing in wrestling, and you want to have great psychology and a good storyline. A good story is babyface versus heel. The babyface shines on the heel sells, the heel cheats, gets the babyface down, gets heat on the heel, or the heel gets heat on the babyface. The babyface makes a big comeback, you have the false finishes, and then the finish. So if you have that certain psychology in wrestling, you're going to get it right every time as long as you do that. But a lot of these matches now, there's no baby and no heel. It's just two athletes going at it, and I think that's where we lost a little bit of our psychology. Talking on WWE's The Bump about the earlier days of women's wrestling, Trish Stratus revealed The Undertaker has always been supportive of that division. It's just he has always been a good friend, a good support. He would take the time to watch the girls as we are kind of coming up and starting to do stuff in the ring and give us feedback and be like, keep doing it. We used to feel like being under the radar a little bit. The girls were like, we will try and put a match together instead of slapping and do a cat fight. And suddenly we started having matches that people cared about, and he was always there to sort of tell us, yeah, keep doing it. He was always very supportive of the girls. On Wrestling Observer Radio, Meltzer would talk about AEW's upcoming LA Forum show, noting how many people the company are trying to get in the building. It's basically sold out, and what they've done looks like they're going to cut back on the stage because they're going further back in the building. They're opening up tickets in places that even normally they would never open up. Because normally, the way that they would set up and the way WWE set up for TV would max out at about 12,500, but they're looking to try to get over 14,000 in the building, and they will. One of these tickets they have opened up are going to be sold, and they will be sold. There's scattered singles and some platinum seats that are priced really high, but essentially for all regular tickets they are gone. For both shows they are almost gone. The Royal Rumble, Shane McMahon would be sent home by his father for the poor reception his booking decisions received. On The Observer, Meltzer would point out plans for the WWE Hall of Fame ceremony, noting Shane will be there. Shane goes to the Hall of Fame every single Hall of Fame. He's always at the Hall of Fame. Of course, he's going to go with Vince inducting Undertaker to the Hall of Fame. From what I was told, and this is from actually multiple people who are pretty high in the food chain, you never know 100% because it's wrestling, and also Vince can change everything. There's always the chance that he will do something at the last moment, but him being there, of course he's going to be there. Has he ever missed the Hall of Fame? With Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns set to do battle at WrestleMania 38 to unify the WWE and Universal titles, John Cena gave his thoughts on this match while speaking to Forbes, firstly saying this about Lesnar: "He totally can do it all. He's not just a strong guy and an agile guy, he has such depth of character, and the fact that he was holding in these promos for so long and unleashing them now, truthfully, it shows how good and how patient and how smart he is. And Roman has grown so much from that match we saw years ago, and now it is truly a coin flip. These are two of the best guys, at their peak, fighting for the most important prize with narrative and story behind it, and each one truly believes in themselves and their own truth." During his ESPN interview, Triple H would reveal that thanks to having a defibrillator, he will no longer compete in pro wrestling matches. Talking about this on 105.3 The Fan in Dallas, Ric Flair noted that he is sickened over this. "I'm sick that he's not going to have that last match, to be honest with you, but his legacy is in place and he will be highly thought of and highly remembered forever. But I do wish he had one more match. I just want him to make an appearance. I think wrestling fans need a live appearance from him, to hear it in his own words, just in front of 80,000 people, one time." And this was your Pro Wrestling News Update. I hope you're all having a great day. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you later.